everyone, and welcome to your weekly favorite show, The Weekly Matters. Today we are discussing matters, women and their contribution to the economy and the country at large. With me is Mariam Sheikh, a development expert, and Stephanie Zhu, the Executive Director of Phoenix Reason. Welcome to the show. Mariam, I will start with you. First of all, I know that apart from your being an author and a poet, you contribute a lot to women issues, especially the pastoralist community and women empowerment. Before we go deep, first of all, does the traditional role of women restrict their contribution to the country development?
Thank you very much. Good evening, viewers. Ahmed, I think the traditional role does not actually, if women were allowed to play in their own sphere, because the traditional role allowed them to have their own sphere. But within that sphere, there has been a lot of curtailments, there's been a lot of challenges, and that makes them invisible. But if women were empowered within their own sphere and given all that they need within that sphere, then definitely we would see more contributions, whether it's a traditional space or whether it is an international space, whether it's at a national level. Women just need to have the kind of empowerment that suits the space that they're in, and so that they're able to play more. So generally, often people say within the traditional setup there are cultures, and the general understanding is cultures curtail, but cultures do also give women their space. But it's the misunderstanding, it is the patriarchy, it is issues around women themselves not being very empowered that curtails, but it's not the space.
Now talking of patriarchy, the other day, just 2 days ago I think, the Gender Commission was in Wajir in northern Kenya, and they were doing a talk about the two-third in regards to women, and it was a conference set up sort of, and people were invited, women were invited, women were invited. I don't know whether you have seen the video itself that went viral on social media. Men were giving, even quoting from the Quran, whether right or wrongly, subject to discussion, saying that women should not be taking some positions, women should not be at the forefront in some things, and the discussion was such that even on social media the people were dismissing those who are quote unquote misusing the ayahs to advance a certain agenda. What's your take on that?
My take is if we are allowed a quarter of what Islam allows us, a quarter, just a quarter, our lives would be 1,000-fold better than it is now. So it is true, religion and especially Islam is in the hands of men. They have been the people who are the custodians, they have been the sheikhs, they have been everything. So women were always left behind.
But Islam has given women a position.
So that's what I'm saying. So it's our own patriarchy. It's our own setup. It's the misinterpretation. That's why I said if we are allowed a quarter of what Islam gives us, our lives will be 1,000-fold better than it is now. But as Somalis, and since you mentioned Wajir, if we look, we are a community that is majority Muslim, but very ignorant. We are very ignorant in Islam. We are people who memorize the Quran, 114 chapters, verse for verse, but maybe 90% do not know the meaning of Bismillah. And that's why. So it's like the analogy of the donkey that carries the honey. It doesn't know the load it's carrying, how sweet it is. So this religion that is in the hands of majority men, they have often misinterpreted to continue the agenda of patriarchy and ways of putting women aside, which is not Islamic. It is not Islamic. Okay. So those are misinterpreted ayahs. Women are allowed, we are allowed to be in the public sphere. And in fact, we are, Ahmed. Some of us already are. A number of us already are. Now, we are not begging anybody. So all we are saying is, please, we're already out here. Just make sure you don't step on our toes.
Okay. Stephen, and you have been in the women empowerment sector for quite a while. Can you tell us what you do exactly through the
Phoenix Reason?
Phoenix Reason.
Yeah. So Phoenix Risen is an organization that seeks to actually bring men and women together in order to combat sexism as a root cause of sexual violation. I think the topics that we were just talking about, when we talk about feminism, right? A lot of people turn off because they think that feminists are women, like men haters, that feminists only care about women, right? But what I think is a lot more important is about gender equality, right? It's not about men being better than women or women being better than men. It's about having equal opportunities. And a lot of times those opportunities aren't equal because there are so many systemic, cultural, societal things that are built into our everyday actions, our, engagements, our conversations, whatever it is that we may not be fully aware of. And so what Phoenix Risen does is we do these empathy workshops. We bring men and women together to have these open, constructive conversations around what it's like to be of the other gender, right? And we're not here to tell anyone what's wrong or right. We're here to say, how can you have more direct conversations, more open understanding of what the opposite gender is like, and how can we be more harmonious in the way that we interact.
Okay, now Mariam, we're still back to the traditional, setup, because that is where we mostly arise from. The other time, even as recent as last week, there was a serious debate on social media about FGM and how it curtails some basic rights of women. You have been at the forefront.
Yes.
And I'm sure Islam, Assistant Sheikh said something about it. What is your take on the whole thing of FGM and the way we practice as a community and how it curtails women? And what do you think should be done differently?
Yeah, FGM, of course, is a practice that violates so many rights of women, not just a number, but so many rights, including the right to life, because many girls have actually died in the process or after the aftermath. The right to life, the right to good health, the right to have their organs intact, the right to enjoy sexual intercourse, the right to have, a life free from infections and all this. So life free from pain, and so FGM is a violation of human rights, so to speak, basically. And FGM is not Islamic. It has nothing to do with Islam. Over the years, we have wrapped FGM around Islam. We've given it a beautiful name. We call it so many Islamic, like Arabic terms I used to define it, but no, FGM has no basis in Islam.
Okay, if
it is a
no
cultural practice.
Islam and we are Muslims.
Yes.
Why is it still rampant?
You know why? It's because it's a cultural practice. It's because it's a traditional practice, and it's because it's a social norm within our community. And it's something that has been there for long, and we've justified it as Islamic. That is where the problem is for the Somali community. We justify this practice as Islam. We have wrapped it around Islam. So to unwrap it, it only takes Islam to unwrap it. Islam is in the hands of who? Men. So are they ready to come, delink it from Islam, and make us now use the Islamic teachings that this practice violates? Because the practice violates Islamic teachings on the chastity, on the sanctity of the human body. For example, we are not supposed to cut organs in Islam, not for even an animal, not for a human being. So you cannot come and cut healthy, functional organs and claim they're Islamic. So this is why we have a problem. And a number of sheikhs, renowned sheikhs, whose daughters are not cut, would still stand in front of cameras and say, yes, there is something, it's mubah, it can be allowed, it's, they dilly-dally around the thing, yet their daughters are safe. So this is where we have a problem. It's because the community thinks, and for so many centuries, they have been made to believe this is one practice that is Islamic. Remember how the Somalis began covering themselves and taking the hijab. The first time it came, I'm sure you were not born then, this was like in the late 80s, there was an uprising and people were like, what is this? This is bid'ah, this is an invasion. And yet that was a verse in the Quran, a verse that is not subject to misinterpretation on anything. It's because culturally, girls used to let hair flow. We used to wear the guntila that was very figure-hugging and, figure revealing. But when that verse, people began using it, it was an absurd thing at first. So that is how norms are. Norms need to change with time. And let me tell you, the train of change is already in gear. FGM will definitely come to an end. All we are doing is try to fasten. It's just we're just being catalysts. But otherwise, FGM will end. Yes, we still do practice it to the tune of 90-something, 94, 96.
We have seen a situation where young girls are cut. Sometimes some of them bleed to death. that hasn't that still even, you know, instill some sort of concern within those who practice?
When they cut and the girl dies immediately, it's qadarullah. When they cut and she comes to die 20 years later in giving birth, they never ever connected the two. So there's a disconnect between the problems FGM causes, both immediate and later on. So that is also where the problem is. People do not link that this is, and if somebody dies, you know how our people are, qadarullah, their time has reached. But the thing is, it's a life-threatening, life-endangering practice. So people need to actually appreciate that fact, that this is an irreparable, irreplaceable practice that is life-threatening. And it has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with Islam.
I can see you're nodding.
No, so I think it's when I first moved to Kenya, I was at this event that was talking about Chinese feminism and kind of African Kenyan feminism. And one of the things that was brought up repeatedly is this idea of bad culture versus good culture, right? In a lot of the traditional practices that we have, right? I'm Chinese, and there's a lot of terrible Chinese practices, foot binding, for instance, right? Which we no longer practice. But a lot of that, as bad as that exact practice is, the reason for it comes from a much deeper cultural desire for something, right? So that may be like a rite of passage for a girl, that may be a coming into womanhood, that may be a wanting to protect her for something, right? And so I think as we move forward, as culture transforms and accepts new norms, sometimes the best way to usher out bad culture and to bring in good culture is to conscientiously look for new practices that can like replace but still be preserving what the original purpose was, right? If the original purpose is to introduce a woman into what adulthood is, then how can you create a similar rite of passage?
But you see, for the Somali community, FGM is not a rite of passage. We don't practice it because it's a rite of passage. We practice it for so many other reasons, to preserve virginity, to ensure chastity and all these things, yes, which are entirely good. But you see that the root to that is wrong. So a girl needs to know right from wrong. Even if you cut limbs, Somali say, even when you cut the hand, whatever remains will shake. Yes. I mean, that is how, because the desire comes from where? The desire comes from the brain, it comes from within. And it's when you desire a man, when you go and do something with him. It's not when you've already started. So these organs actually come to play only when the person gets into the act. So this is where now this whole misunderstanding. I don't know whether you saw this the other day. I had a short poem on why am I so misunderstood, and I called it clit speak. You know, like it's like the clitoris actually speaking and wondering, why am I so demonized? What have I ever done? You know, yes. Why do people hate me this much? So I think it's yes, definitely. And for us as Muslims, we do not have any excuse. Islam is complete. Islam is complete. Islam is a way of life. Islam came to protect life, progeny, intellect, and health, and all that FGM affects negatively. So it's a practice that is totally against Islam, and that's why for the Somalis, it's a religious-oriented practice that actually works with them. You have to question this thing from Islam.
For how long will you question? Because years in, year out, things are happening. Sometimes, as you said, when the girl is cut and she dies immediately, they said, you know, Qadarullah. 20 years later, we never connect the disconnect between the two. And do you foresee a situation where this thing one day will end?
Yes, I foresee where it's going to end, because I am a Somali, I'm a survivor of FGM, and my daughter is not cut, so I'm going to be cut, inshallah. And a couple of friends of mine. But the thing is, FGM, we need to appreciate, is a social norm. Social norms take even 25 years or 30 to change. So it's not an overnight thing.
Now we leave FGM there. We have seen a situation whereby of late, you know, women empowerment, there's the Kenya Constitution gives women a lot of empowerment. Islam empowers women, like we have said. But of late we are seeing a trend whereby some of the ills that happen within the society, it has got the face of a woman. You talk of corruption and women are there. You talk of so many things. We are going to discuss that in depth, but we are going for a short break. We'll be back. But before we go for break, I want to remind our viewers that we are also live on our social media platforms, Twitter at Horizon TV Kenya, also on Facebook, Horizon TV Kenya, and myself at Ahmed Qadar 1. I'm sure Marin has a Twitter handle. What's your Twitter handle?
At Mariam Deka.
At Mariam Dega. Are you on Twitter?
Yes, PhoenixRisen.org.
Phoenix.org. Keep it there, we'll be back.